All right, and welcome back to the Pirates Fan Forum here on DK Pittsburgh Sports Podcast Network. If you're watching the video, pardon the interruption. Sorry, we had a little malfunction with some technical stuff, which, as you know, is Jim and I are really good with.
Yeah,
So,
experts.
but we wanted to talk about
Let's hope our
Cabrian
baseball
Hayes.
analysis is a little bit better.
We wanted to talk about Cabrian Hayes because Cabrian Hayes is good with the tools at hand. He is really playing crazy defense for this team, and I think we underappreciate it because we watch it every day. I think when you've been watching these playoffs, they've been good plays at third base. It's not as though there's nobody else that can play it well, but you notice little things that Cabrian does that other third basemen don't or can't.
Mm-hmm.
And I think he's deserving of these awards. Fielding Bible has given him the third base award, and he's also won Defensive Player of the Year from them. So that's not the Gold Glove. It's not always predictive of the Gold Glove, but it really kind of should be, Jim.
Yeah, well, I think that's where this award even came from, is that it was trying to give a better, more true indicator of defensive prowess, right? So I think it's still highly regarded, and it tries to give people a better, more accurate look at like really who is the best at what they do. And I will say, Gary, I do think that you're right. Like, we get spoiled with him at third, and it's funny because when you think about Hayes and how he fields that position, you don't see him having to do all the crazy acrobatic stuff. And I think that almost hurts him. He's so good at the footwork and the body placement that he rarely is in a position where he even has to do those things.
Yeah.
And it almost hurts him, with the casual person that watches, because if you're in another market or whatever, you're not seeing excuse me, you're not seeing those crazy acrobatic plays from him because he doesn't ever really have to do it. Does that make sense?
It absolutely makes sense. I mean, I've watched it before. I think I've seen tremendous defenders and taken them for granted in the past, you know? And he's probably the best third baseman that I've ever seen in my lifetime. And I mean that. I my next closest would be like Terry Pendleton. I thought he was tremendously smooth there. I'm too young for like Brooks Robinson to be like, one of my memories. You know what I mean? So I'm talking about like in my lifetime. Wade Boggs comes to mind like early on. He's up there at least. Chipper. Jim, you are muted, sir.
This
There you go. This is not working today. Try as we might, it just isn't working today. There you go, Jim.
Gary, can you?
Yes, I can hear you right now.
All right.
Talk.
Okay. I'm gonna say this. We don't like to give Arenado a lot of credit here in Pittsburgh, but we need to. He's been really outstanding. And the fact that Cabrian Hayes can now almost say that we believe that he's surpassed him is a huge compliment to Cabrian Hayes. We don't have Brooks
Sure.
Robinson to judge. I wish we did. From all I've heard and read, is that he was absolutely incredible. But hey, I think Hayes he's finally broken through, I think.
Yeah. I mean, to do it for as long as Arenado did it too. That's crazy. You're right.
Yeah.
pretty big omission on my part to say to not automatically coronate him the best ever. I guess like he's just never. Maybe this is my problem. I haven't watched him enough to really have. I felt like he played pretty pedestrian when he faced the Pirates, usually at third base. And maybe I'm guilty of the same thing I'm saying about Hayes. You just don't notice how smooth he is.
Well, maybe you take it. Yeah, we take a lot of things for granted that you see time and time and time again. We tell everyone not to do that, but hey, we probably do it with Sidney Crosby every once in a while.
Oh, for
So,
sure.
I think overall, looking back on it, I think Arenado and Brooks Robinson had a really similar fielding percentage. So maybe they are the gold standard, but Hayes has a lot of baseball left in him, Gary, and maybe he's got to do the longevity part of it. That's the thing, right? Those two are great for so long, and that matters. So Hayes is there, but let's keep it there, right?
When you think about like how many third basemen can even possibly impact the game as much as he does, you don't even face lefties. Lefties aren't hitting the ball over there most of the time,
Mm,
So
right,
I mean, like, it's not like the middle infield where you're gonna have opportunity upon opportunity upon opportunity to steal runs, basically.
right.
But to just get the impact he does from third base, it's crazy, and it just speaks to how he's got just an undying motor over there. So
Yeah, and I'm curious. I don't even know when they do the Gold Gloves, but needless to say, Pirates Twitter will be in a absolute Chernobyl moment if he doesn't win it this year. Let's just say that.
I've looked at it just about every which way that I can, and the only way that it doesn't go to him is if they give it to Austin Riley, and then in all sincerity, it might as well be the Silver Slugger. And which is why I think you find somebody like the Fielding Bible putting out their own award,
Hmm.
because that's what has become of the Gold Glove, which is a shame. It shouldn't be that way.
Yeah. Well, even their they refer to themselves, or they're described as sabermetrically inclined group that does this.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
it is a more true indicator. We'll see if it translates.
Right. So let's talk about how close these Pirates really are to being the Snakes, because I keep hearing they should be expecting that next year, right? It should be right around the corner, right? I don't think that I don't think that people necessarily understand how Arizona got their team to this point. I don't know if people have been paying close attention to their rebuild, but
Yeah.
does it really mirror what the Pirates are, or where the Pirates are?
In some ways, yes. In other ways, no. And the no's are fairly big differences, I think. Um, and by the way, Gary, you're going to see me frozen in this position. If I apologize for people just listening, I want to make sure we don't have any more technical difficulties. So I'm trying to hold on to a cord as we do this. But anyways, I think there's just this false equivalency thing going on right now with when you take a look at records, and
Right.
you're just like, oh, well, the Pirates were only 6 games worse than the Diamondbacks. And so by that logic, they're close and they can do what the Diamondbacks did. Well, I mean, once you start looking at what the Diamondbacks did, have done, are doing, well, the Pirates have a ways to go, and it's all about how you're going to get there at this point too.
I mean, I can see how it could happen. I can see like a general underlying, mostly all the kids take a little bit of a step forward, at least. That's a good baseline for where you kind of get maybe those other half of those 6 games that you make up, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then O'Neal Cruz, if he is a star, a true star, I mean, like, not one of these liabilities that we're worried about facing lefties, not a problem in the field, at least not to the point where you're freaking out that he can't play shortstop. Just if he's a star, legit, in the conversation for the All Star game, that's probably enough to get you into the playoffs. But you need somebody to take off like Corbin Carroll.
Yeah. You know, and I'll stick with the record thing for a little longer just to give people some perspective on this. I think when you look at the Diamondbacks, you could make a case that they were actually better than their record. And um, and I don't mean that by saying, well, their postseason justifies that. I'm going to go back to the regular season, Gary, and I'm going to tell you why I think they're better than their record was. And that's because they were past the All-Star break or right at it, past the midway point of the season, and they were 16 games over 500. So they were in the meat of the season past the halfway point, and they were 50-34.
Right.
They just happened to have a 30-game stretch where it was awful, awful. Now, I don't know what I wish I'd have had more time. I would have loved to look at their schedule in there and whatever. And then they rebounded and played well down the stretch again.
Sure.
So I think it's a little misleading. And the other caveat that I would put in all this is like, look, the playoff system has changed, and so that has to be taken into account for what I'm about to say. But this is still an outlier. Only winning 85 games or 84 games and getting to the World Series. The only team that has done it and did it with less was the 83 win St. Louis Cardinals in 06. So
Right.
like, if that's kind of like your bar, it's still a weird, it doesn't happen very often. Let me put it to you that way.
I mean, if you see that as your likeliest path to winning a championship, then I can understand the eagerness to accept it. But I don't think that anybody should believe that that's a route that is chosen happily. I don't think people are going like, boy, I really want to squeak into the playoffs and be on the road as much as possible and, you know, make sure that everything times up so we're hot by the time we get there, like
Yeah, and then you got to think of like the division they're in, like that
right.
that division alone. I mean, even the Padres were down this year, and they still weren't pushovers. We know what the Dodgers are. I mean, yeah, everyone has somebody they can beat around in their division. That's what Colorado is for. But so I just
I want to toss a statement at you and see how clownish this sounds.
okay.
Arizona could very well, and just correct me if I'm crazy here. Arizona could very well win the World Series this year and then show up next year picked to finish like second or third in their own division.
Depending on what the Padres do, I think that's entirely reasonable.
Right? San
Um,
Francisco, you figure, isn't going to take a huge step back. If anything, they're going to pick something up.
they've been trying to actually
Yeah.
spend money, and it hasn't worked out in the sense of landing the big boys.
I suppose LA could dip, but maybe they don't need to. And their farm system near the top is stacked anyway. They might need a good like youth purge.
Yeah,
And then you got the Padres. Who knows? They want to shed salary, but that doesn't mean they want to stink.
right.
So
And
I mean,
And that's the other thing is like, even I forgot about the Giants, which is, they even, I think, had a little better record than the Pirates this year. Does anybody think that they're on the cusp of doing anything spectacular? I would submit no. The Mets had, I think, 1 game difference from the Pirates.
And they already said they are for sure going into a rebuild.
Yeah, but again, back to that, just equating being 78 wins. I just think it's built on a little bit of a fallacy to begin with. Just looking at the record, I think you really do got to dive in to look at the teams themselves.
I mean, let's talk about the teams that I mean, I think the Pirates. You guys are familiar with what they've done here. They went the full tear down rebuild. Arizona or Texas went the full tear down rebuild. Arizona, I don't feel like they did. I feel like they made some trades. They held on to some guys that they wanted to kind of make their veterans instead of bringing in veterans once you have a young team. So they kept Ketel Marte. They kept their first baseman. I can't remember his name right this second.
It's Walker.
Yeah. So they kept guys like that around, and they brought in a few veterans towards the trade deadline in the spring and everything. But they weren't afraid to make some pretty big trades, like the one they made with Toronto for Gurriel Jr., where they sent out Varsho. I mean, like,
Yeah,
that was a pretty big deal. I thought Varsho was a big piece of this team, and yeah,
the more you dive into them, it's actually been kind of like a master class at looking at how you could do this. But boy, you've got to be really good at doing it, and you can't have many missteps, and a lot of things have to align to do it. Their roster right now, Gary, is made up of 12 homegrowns, 9 trades, and 5 free agents. Now, what I would start with on that is the free agents. It's not going to blow you away. I'll tell you who the free agents are. They got Merrill Kelly, and he was the guy that, boy, they found him, and he was pitching in Korea,
right.
and he's just been really solid for them. Like they
Just
got
like
him.
Miles Michaelis a couple years ago for the Cardinals.
Yeah. They brought in Longoria. Now that's just for that veteran presence. Still hit double-digit home runs in the regular season. By no means a guy that anybody's worried about beating you, but not a big piece there. Joe Mantiply from their bullpen, guy that was well traveled, but he's been really good. I mean, they don't have much in the free agent market. Now where they
Right.
did, here's where their differences are with the Pirates. Not only have they gone out and made really smart trades, they've gotten a lot of juice out of their homegrown talent, and they found it everywhere, whether it's Corbin Carroll, and they've locked him up, by the way. They've got him at 8 years now, 115 million. Kid's the real deal, right? And he's, but I mean, they got Brandon Fott. They got him in the 5th round. They got Kevin Ginkel. He was a 22nd round selection. Saul Frank, 6th round pick. But then they've also hit on their earlier picks when it's Carroll or Pavin Smith. They've got Jordan Lawler ready to go. Ryan Nelson's a 2nd round draft pick. So they've kind of hit on. They haven't missed on a lot early, and they found some gems along the way too.
Yeah, and they were one of those teams that you could never tell whether they were going to sell at the deadline or buy at the deadline. Sometimes they bought because it was a good opportunity to get something.
Yeah,
You know,
definitely.
and I don't think they necessarily thought, "Hey, we're going to win this year." I think they just thought, "Hey, this is on the table. It's as good a time as any. Let's not have next year be the first time this guy gets acquainted with us. Let's just do it now."
Right. Like to your point, let's look at Christian Walker for them. When Arizona was going to think about going through all this, they claimed him off waivers from the Reds after 2017. Do you know what that guy has done since they've got him?
Yeah.
He's fifth most in WAR among first basemen the past 2 seasons. He's 32 years old, and he has a better WAR the last two seasons than Pete Alonso and Vladimir Guerrero Jr. Like, man, you gotta be good at this, and you gotta get a little lucky too. And they have done it. They have done it, Gary. Like I'm telling you, like I'll
Well,
send you this.
he was the replacement for Goldschmidt.
Yeah.
So like, you know, you talk about filling big shoes too. They filled him with a waiver claim. And like,
Think
you know,
about the Pirates
but
right
it's your
base.
brains. Imagine like Miguel Rivas working out. That's what that's like. You know what I mean?
Wait, uh,
Or
no,
Alfonso Rivas, I'm sorry.
yeah,
Yeah. That's like him working out.
yeah,
And we'd be like, "Oh my goodness. Look what they found," right? We wouldn't trust it next season.
right.
You know, it actually when you say it like that, it makes you understand like why an extension was never seeked with him really. You know, he's kind of playing out the string there. You know, probably one more year and then they'll move on from him, right? So,
Yep.
yeah.
And here, let me tell you where they also really excelled. And this is the kind of thing like when you want to compare the Pirates being close record wise.
Yeah.
Well, let me tell you what, Ketel Marte, they got him in a 5-player deal from Seattle Mariners. Look what that has turned into. They got Zach Gallen in a trade when they traded Jazz Chisholm. Like you've got to trade and you've got to hit on those trades to get to where they're at. I think whenever they even Lourdes Gurriel, he was kind of a throw-in the Moreno trade,
Yeah.
and he's hit 24 home runs. Like that, you've got to be so good in every area if you don't want to spend money on free agents, and they haven't had to do it, and good for them. But man, this ain't easy. This ain't
No.
easy at all.
Cuz Texas did it a completely different way. Texas, they bottomed out. They sold off stars. And they stocked the coffers, they traded off, and they developed a couple of them. And once they had them on the doorstep, they lost. They went to their peak of losing. The next season, boom, they went out and signed a huge, over $500 million deal for a guy, right?
Right.
So, I mean, that's the way they stepped back into it, and their teams made up 14 homegrown, 10 free agents. You know, 16 of them via trade. So, yeah, I mean, there's a lot of different ways to go about doing this. The Pirates, if you really look at it, they're on the same kind of ship. Right now, if you look at their breakdown, they're 40 man right now, which is over by quite a few. So,
Yeah, right.
um, they got 18 homegrown, only 2 via free agent right now, 19 trade. So you can see where their talent acquisition has come from right now. So I just think it's worth looking at, and it's worth understanding that it's not all about money. But at some point, that free agent number, it's gonna be up 5, 6, 7 if you're really gonna do this. You know what I mean? It has
Yeah.
to be. You have to augment it somewhere.
You've got to, and then you've got to be able to judge if you are coming up short. Well, then that means you need to probably spend a little bit more to make up the ground. And I think that that's where I see with the Pirates right now is like, okay, great. You want to maybe get involved with some trades? Perfect. I don't have a problem with that. You obviously have to try to deal from some strengths if you think you have them. But you also have to realize where you are deficient and how can you make that up? Well, I'll tell you how you can make it up a little bit. You gotta spend a little bit of money. You got
Yeah,
to.
I think they're going to have to. We've talked about it in the past, feeling that it would be smart if the Pirates would trade some prospects because they were getting so kind of loaded towards the top of the system there. Now I think it's becoming a necessity. After you clear the 60-man guys and everything, this roster is going to be up around 47 or so on a 40-man.
Yeah.
So it's got to come crashing down, which means you're going to lose a lot of the fringe guys, that you probably aren't going to care much about, like Rivas or, people along those lines, Thomas Hatch, people along those lines. But they're going to kind of be forced to make room quickly, and I'm hoping that they have some wheeling and dealing of at the prospect level alone. I think they could do some swapping that doesn't even touch major leagues.
Yeah, I would hope that is the route they're going to try to go with it. And here's the thing: if you got to give a little bit to get where you want to go right now, I think that's just the price you have to pay. And if you think you can draft and identify talent, well, guess what? You can restock the next year. I
Right.
mean, so you can't prospect hug forever. You cannot do it in my opinion.
No, I think we talked about the hit rates on prospects before, and there's some scary numbers as far as like what you actually get out of the vast majority of them. You know, I,
Yeah.
I don't like to talk about them like commodities; they're human beings. But when you're thinking like a general manager, I'm sorry, they're commodities in many ways. Prospects just don't have that great of a hit rate. So if you can trade somebody that's maybe supposed to be good for somebody that you think can be for a year or two, that is probably a good move. That's
Right.
probably a win right now for the team you have because that's where you are. So I could see them making some moves that I think are going to be painful for people that have had their eyes just trained on the minor leagues for 3 4 years now. I
Right.
think there's some names they've fallen in love with that are probably going to be footnotes in the history of Pittsburgh Pirates.
Yeah. And I don't think you can be paralyzed. I get why Pirate fans might be with the fear of moving on from someone and they turn into good players somewhere else. Like, the Cardinals are taking a beating right now for um uh the guys they've let go, which is Arozarena and oh God, the guy for Texas.
Garcia.
Yeah, like they're taking a beating. But you know what? It has worked out for them more times than it has not. You're not going to not get burnt every once in a while.
Right.
It will happen.
Sure. You just have to be good enough to insulate yourself so much that it's not the end of the world that it happened. That's
Exactly. And
all.
I think that's what happens here in Pittsburgh is like um we, and I say we in a general term, that it's magnified, right? Because we're not winning, and anytime someone goes and has any success somewhere else, well, that magnifies it.
So here's what I think needs to happen for the Pirates to have an Arizona Diamondbacks type season in 2024, Jim. I think it's there. I think it's on the table. Three things. I'll let you have three things too.
Hmm.
Here's my first three things.
Okay.
One, O'Neal Cruz has to be a star player. He has to be. He can't be a project this year. He has to be a star, or that magical 2024 run isn't happening. Mitch Keller needs to go from being the ace of the Pittsburgh Pirates and being somebody that other teams legitimately do not want to face. Period. He needs to be that guy, the shutdown guy. And then they need another star to emerge. I don't care if that's somebody that's already here, like Henry Davis or Andy Rodriguez or Nick Gonzalez, or if it is Paul Skeens. That has to happen. That's three things that I think minimally have to happen. And they're all star shots.
Yeah. Trying to digest that. I will say that if they want to do what the Diamondbacks are going to do, then I think you're going to need to see them, because they're so reliant on these young guys. I think you're going to need to see them all take a step forward. I think you're going to need to see Endy take that step forward. I think you're going to need to see Henry Davis take that step forward. I think even, Cruz is a no-brainer. They need him to be pretty special. And I think he can be.
I make no bones about it. They need a Corbin Carroll.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be O'Neal Cruz, but that's what they need. They need a genuine major league wide star.
Yeah.
That everyone is looking at because the dude is unstoppable. That's what has to happen to elevate this team truly.
Right.
At least offensively.
And I think some people would be like, well, wait a minute. It's Corbin Carroll. Yeah, he was good, but he ain't that good. No, he really was. I mean, 25 home runs, 54 steals, OPS in the upper 800s. He was legit, and they're very fortunate that that's how he came on, because they don't have a lot of star power. It's a very solid team, but he kind of stepped up and took that role. Well, who are you looking at with the Pirates that can have that kind of impact?
There's a lot of candidates. There's just not anyone that I think has stepped up and done so.
And truly, like, realistic that you want to hang your hat on. Could Brian Reynolds have a career year? Absolutely, he could. Can Hayes still maybe take a step forward? Sure. But Cruz is the one with the high ceiling, right? So
Cruz is the one that you feel has potential to do something game changing. And I mean like season changing.
Right.
He's the one that's got the potential to put up a 40 home run season.
Yeah.
He's the one that has the potential to potentially drive in 130, 140 runs. Like that's what I mean. Genuine star power. Last time they won, that was Andrew McCutchen.
Right. There's got to be at least a guy that, is totally feared. And even then, sometimes it doesn't work, because look what happened to the Phillies.
Well, even looking at the Phillies, part of the reason that their team worked, a lot of good players, right? You can say whatever you want to about Bryce Harper, but Bryce Harper was the star of those stars, right? He was the sun that they all revolved around, right? Every single one of them. They all looked to him. He's their leader. He's the star. Every team needs that. The problem a lot of these teams get is they get all these stars together and they're all of equal footing and they just pound each other in the head for whose team it is, right?
Yeah, and it just doesn't mesh. San Diego, I mean.
Well, that's why it works in Philly, though, because they all succumb to Bryce. They just let him have that.
Yeah.
He's the leader. San Diego, maybe that should be Soto,
Right.
But unfortunately, it's been people that don't glue a room together. So, you need that.
Let me finish out those three things. So I really do think it's highly dependent on the guys that they have drafted pretty highly and they need to or that they're have high expectations for, those guys have to take a step forward. I think you're going to have to see a pitcher that's on the roster to really, from a starting perspective, really come in and help solidify that starting rotation. Obviously I look to Skeens as maybe part of that, but that's probably not going to be from the beginning. I think they've got to go out and add somebody that's a legitimate starter. That has to happen, because I don't think you want to depend on 2 or 3 of those coming from inside. And the third one, I think that bullpen needs to be what I think it can be. I think that will make up for a lot of things if you can get a bullpen that can be really, really good from that 6 through 9, those 6 through 9 innings. And I think there's potential there too.
So here we are dreaming, right?
Mm-hmm.
We're painting best case scenario pictures of all this stuff, and neither of us mentioned that they got to get themselves a good number 2, because we both were limited to 3 like things we
Well,
could
that
do.
was your rules.
Well, but they got to get themselves a qualified number 2. They got to be relatively healthy. They they could use Paul Skeens to jump up and be a star, like just in time to take them into the playoffs.
Right.
There's so many lightning in a bottle type things that would have to happen for them to get there, just like there were for Arizona. Just because it happened doesn't mean that it's just right on the corner for everybody that pursues the same path. That's all.
Yeah, and I guess that's where my big thing with this is like, sure, the stars can align, but boy, a lot of things have to go right when you're not. The money won't guarantee anything. We've seen that. We know that. That's what everybody likes to point to. Doesn't mean that doesn't guarantee anything. No, it does not. But if you're a team that's not spending a lot, man, you got to do it through homegrown. You got to do it through trades. You got to do it through picking up someone in a reclamation project. Like there's all these things, and you got to hit on a lot of them.
If you want to take something from Arizona, if you want Bob Nutting and crew to take something from Arizona, instead of taking that it's okay to get 84 wins and you've got a shot, cowboy, you've done your job. I'd rather them take from them that it's okay to take risks and have them fail and you can still get it done. The highest paid Arizona Diamondback this year is Madison Bumgarner, and he was DFA'd in April.
Yeah.
Failing in that aspect may suck for your wallet, writing that check every year or whatever.
Right.
But it does not have to doom your entire process. In fact, you better start looking at it as collateral damage, because it's gonna happen if you do this game any justice or any attempt at actually winning.
Well, what you're saying is you can't be so risk averse that 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 it can't even work out for you because you didn't even want to try it. And let's remember too, everybody wants to say, oh, Pirates and the Diamondbacks, and they're close. Well, the Diamondbacks didn't blow away anybody with payroll, but I still think they were in the 110, 120 mark. It's not like, they're $30 million. It's not, it's not what the Pirates did. So, there's a difference there too.
No, I mean, I think the Pirates are pretty close to where the Diamondbacks were the year before, financially at least. And I don't know. I also just don't put a whole lot of stock in that until it starts to matter. When they start making what I consider to be financial decisions on players internally, like whether to keep them or not. Let's say they swing and miss on signing Keller. They screw that up. To me, that's them being too risk averse.
Right.
Because there's no reason to let a player that wants to be here, is still affordable, get away from you at this stage where your team is and what you've built to. So, I mean, it would be like Arizona next year going like, well, hey, Zach, that was pretty great of you to get us to the World Series. See you later. We got to trade you. It's time, you know?
Yeah. I would submit to you, Gary, Mitch Keller is, because of where they are with their starting pitching, he's such a linchpin. And I don't know how they feel that they're going to be able to get it done or get where they want to go without signing him, without extending him.
I can't
So,
imagine they do. I can't imagine that it's their goal to not get this done. That doesn't mean they'll get it done. I'm just saying, like, if there's a number there that can be met, I'd be pretty disappointed to find out that it didn't happen. They still have 2 years left where they can kind of pad what he would normally make in arbitration, so they can still get out of them relatively cheap. And they can get this done. And I would be pretty upset if they didn't, if only because it completely defeats the purpose of everything else.
right, that's what I'm saying. It's kind of, to me, the key piece that you've got to be able to get it done. And if you have to pay market value, and maybe Mitch Keller wants exactly that. He's not willing to take something. I'm just speculating, but okay, so finally, just do it. Just do it. You've put yourself in a position financially where you can do that. You can't hope to get everybody on a deal, and
Yeah,
certainly not pitchers.
right. And do yourself a favor and go out and look at the market right now and go, man, I would love to have a Jordan Montgomery on my team next year. He's going to cost $20 million a year. Boy, would I like to have him. And then look back at Mitch and go, he's probably not going to cost $20 million a year if
Right.
I'm smart and I sign him now. And I, you know,
Yeah.
that to me is just the most simplistic way to look at it. You're
Yeah.
going to have to buy it at some point. So buy the cheaper product that you already know you like. Get it done and then
Right.
find guys elsewhere. That's fine.
And even to that point too, is like anybody that you want to dream about the Pirates getting, who's probably out of their range. Wait till you see the stupid money that gets thrown at Blake Snell. Wait till you see the stupid money that gets thrown at Jordan Montgomery.
Yeah. They
You
have them pitching out of wheelchairs too, like signing these guys to
oh,
into their 45th birthday, and
guys
you
that
know
should
that
be
ain't getting
getting
paid.
like guys that should be getting realistically 4 years, because that's where they're probably going to be productive. Some team's going to give them 6 or 7.
Yeah. I think like we look at like the Dodgers payroll and we freak out about, how much they're spending. The amount of dead money they have on their payroll is insane, Jim. It's insane. Like
Yeah.
that's the real difference. The year to year payrolls, like what you're actually paying the guys that are playing for you. Yeah, there's some guys that get a whole lot of money, but there's
Right.
also some dead in the back end of that stuff that I think is just overlooked a lot of times.
Oh, I think, and I've tried, I had some interesting conversations this week on social media about, what's good for the game long term. And everybody wants to just look at payroll, payroll, payroll. Well, yeah, I actually think it should be, when you look at payroll, there should also be is what kind of dead money are they carrying to get a true indicator of what certain teams are up against compared to other ones. And that's the only way you get a real clear picture of that, in my opinion.
Right. So can it happen? Yeah. Yeah, it can. Sure. A lot of stuff's gotta happen though, folks. A lot of stuff. A lot of luck. And a lot of like unreal progression from players, which I'm not rolling out. Jack Sawinski's another guy that I didn't even mention that he could take the jump to full blown star next year. And I think you're looking at a different Pirates team.
Yeah.
Doesn't have to be O'Neal Cruz. But somebody's got to turn into that whole league is looking at us type star.
You got to have a couple real big boppers in your lineup right now.
Yep.
You have to. And, I think at one point before these game 6 and 7s, it was like the team that had out homered the other team was like 20-3.
Yeah.
I mean, like it's just become such a game of, if you put the ball out of the ballpark at a pretty regular pace, you, when you're winning 20 of 23 games, if you simply out homer the other team, Gary,
Right.
that that speaks volumes as to where the game is, where it's probably going to be at for a long time.
All right, Jim. Well, technical difficulties aside, this was a great show. Really had a
Yeah.
good time talking to you, man.
No, yeah. Listen, this was good because, like, I think we were both sitting around this week thinking, let's dive into. I think it's a cool series to watch, and I really like the fact that the Pirates are in a situation where, hey, at least we can start making a bridge to see how they could get there.
Right. Right. It's at least not something you have to laugh off the screen now.
Right.
You know.
Yeah. That you're even within shouting distance of it. And I keep saying it. I know you keep saying it this off season. Man, it's so critical. It's so super critical.
It really is. I'm anxious to start watching it play out. Next week, we're going to talk about our 40-man suggestions, Jim. I think it's time. All right.
Crowded.
Can you study up?
Absolutely.
It's going to be a blast going through that stuff. Maybe I'll make some handy dandy charts or something.
Yeah, no, that'll be good because, man, there's some decisions that are going to need to be made. Some are going to be easy, but not all of them.
Yep. All right, let's hand it off to Ben like we always do. And for those of you who stuck with us here on the technical challenging episode, thank you very much. And I'll say it for us. Let's go Bucks.